The only thing I remember about it was what I heard on the radio back then. Um, there was constant reports from every station about how serious things were over there. And of course we didn't have TV back then, so we couldn't see what was going on, but we could listen to the radio and find and get their interpretation of what's happening. And it just sounded like we had lost our entire fleet, which we almost had, you know. And then there was warnings about there's a possibility that the Japanese fleet might invade the West Coast, or at least bomb it, or shell it, whatever. And which didn't happen, of course, except for one time later on during the war. But the service, the government, the service, and the people were just completely confused about what was happening, and nobody had a real idea of how serious things had become, you know. Until 2 or 3 days later, when they saw in Pearl Harbor all the ships that were sunk. Practically our entire battle fleet was underwater. Oh, several older fellas that lived in the neighborhood and I knew of were called in right away. Oh yeah. I just happened to be young enough to where, in fact, my oldest brother Leonard, he was going to be drafted, so he joined the Navy. And then later, not too much later, maybe 6 months or so, my brother Ross joined the Army. Well, he actually joined the Air Force, but he really was never stationed at an airfield until, except for boot camp, where he went down to Texas. But when he went overseas, he had been transferred to the he was a policeman, like MP, a military policeman, yeah. And that's overseas military and police, and that was quite a job. That's all people talked and thought and did was something for the country. And we were, you know, there was a possible chance that we might lose the war, and then we'd be under somebody else's rule. And everybody stuck together, even, well, a lot of Japanese that were citizens of this country, you know.
The Navy.
I wanted to go in the Navy, right, from the start. I just thought, you know, my brother Leonard told me, he says, hey, on board ship you've got a clean bed to lay in, you've got good food, and you're well protected, you know. So yeah. I thought, well, you know, that sounds better than, you know, sleeping on the ground and eating out of a K ration, you know. And not only that, but he was my older brother, and he influenced me,
right.
You know. So I thought I'd go in the Navy, and my parents said, that was the only way they'd let me go if I went in the Navy, because they thought the Navy was better. I mean, a better chance of surviving, you know. The Army is a high rate of casualties, you know. When I went in, the first thing I did was catch a train from Detroit to Chicago, and we entered Great Lakes Naval Training Station there, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning when we got there. I left Detroit, and weather was, for the time of year, it was winter time, it was kind of balmy, and I had a light jacket on. Well, when I got to Great Lakes, it was below zero, you know, and of course we got off the train. It was a troop train. There must have been 1,000 people there. I don't know, 500 to 1,000 people on that train, service people. And we were all standing out there freezing on the parade ground, freezing, and we had to stand there until non-commissioned officer came out and got up on the platform with a loudspeaker, and he told us what we had to do for the following day in order to get settled in the camp, you know, in what building we were going to be in and whatever, and where to pick up our uniforms. And by that time, we stood out there for a couple hours, I think. And then we went through and picked up mattresses and blankets and pillows. And they told us where to take them. We went to we put them in somewhere. I forget where we put them now. We put them in a building, and then we went to chow, and that was, you know, the first breakfast I'd ever eaten in the Navy. And the first thing they threw on my tray was beans. And I thought, boy, you know, I've never had beans for breakfast before. But that became a Navy tradition, and all throughout the time I was in the service, we had beans on special days, like it was on Wednesdays and Saturdays, I believe. We had beans for breakfast. And it wasn't long. I enjoyed it. It's one of the best breakfasts we had, really. But anyway, I got out to the West Coast. We spent 2.5 days on a train, troop train, going out, and there was about, I think there was about 3,000 sailors on that train, and we with no showers, no way to keep yourself clean at all, and it seemed like every time we got going, we'd pull up on a siding and let another train come through. We were always waiting for another train to pass us or go a different direction. But it took us 2.5 days to go from Chicago to Camp Shoemaker in California, right outside of Vallejo. Ship. It was a brand new ship, just built by Kaiser. And no, I'm sorry, it was built by Bethlehem Steel. Kaiser built a bunch of Liberty ships, but they had dignitaries on board and a lot of big Navy people, and a ceremony, and we were all dressed in our dress blues, and this went on for an hour or two, and finally we got everybody off the ship that didn't belong on there, and we set sail that evening. And as soon as we got out of San Francisco Harbor, we ran into a storm. And of course everybody had never been on a boat or a ship of any kind. They were getting sick. Well, you can imagine what it was like, you know. But the fleet we were in was a carrier fleet. All the carriers. And that was our job. We were an anti-aircraft cruiser, and our main job was to protect the carrier, the one that we were designated to defend. And we just we shadowed the carrier wherever it went. We were right alongside. I'd say a quarter of a mile away, you know. Yes, the Franklin. I don't know whether you've ever heard of the Franklin or not, but it got hit with a kamikaze. We had several of them get hit. We were off Okinawa there, and that's when had a big rate of kamikazes, and they hit the Franklin and just about blew it out of the water. And we lost an awful lot of men on that ship. And we were under attack for what, I think 3 days, you know. And they just kept coming. And luckily, most of them missed the ship they were diving on, or we got them before they got the ship, because there was lots of them. They were all over the sky, and it was just, the whole sky was black. I mean, and the smell, you smell gunpowder. It would almost choke you, you know. And we just kept firing, you know. And there was an awful lot of ships got hit that day. At that time, we were getting ready to invade Japan before they dropped the bombs. And our fleet was 50 miles off the coast. And we were bombing it every day. We were bombing Tokyo and all these other Japanese, Yokohama and all these, constantly, around the clock. When they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, everything just stopped. You know, like, okay, now what's going to happen? And we were all wondering ourselves, could it possibly be that bad that what they claim it did? It blew away a whole city. And we thought that sounded ridiculous. But then, from what I understand, our government asked Japan if they would surrender, and they said no. And so we dropped the second bomb on Nagasaki. And after the second bomb, the Japanese said, well, we've had enough. Everything was celebration, you know. When the war ended, like I was saying, all of our carrier planes went up, took off, and went up and made a formation of planes, and there must have been 200 of them fly over the fleet. And it was one of the the most spectacular things I've ever seen. And of course, everybody was just jumping for joy on board ship, and and shaking hands with everybody, and clapping hands. But there was no big parties or anything, because we were told to be on the alert for a few more days, because anything might happen. A Japanese submarine, or a kamikaze, or anything could come at us. Relax. Take it easy. There weren't too many jobs around at that time, because everybody was changing from war effort back to civilian effort in the factories and whatever. So I didn't do much. I went down and signed up for my unemployment, which they called it a 5220. A serviceman could draw $20 a week for 52 weeks. Most of us guys weren't in any hurry to go back and jump into work, because most of us didn't know what we wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Some went to school, some didn't do much of anything, others got a job if they knew somebody and they could get in somewhere, they'd do that. But I eventually went to work just down the street from where I lived, Republic Steel. Of course, at that time it was called Steel and Tube. And I stayed there for years.